what is the possibility that the parents of those children will ever pass by the house where you live and will do the same thing to your children? Probability बहुत low है ना? And imagine if the parents of those children who were playing there didn't expect you to be there, they will have to send somebody to supervise the children. And if there is somebody supervising the children, children will lose their childhood. फिर मजा क्या रहेगा? If there is somebody supervising, some adult is supervising you all the time when you're playing, there's no fun. You can't do pranks, you can't do mischief, you can't violate the rules. Everything that parents have said not to do, you want to do them. Correct? But you won't be allowed to do that if there's somebody supervising it. But imagine parents who love their children so much, leave the tiny tots on the street. I have played around the roadside. We had no playgrounds in the places where we lived in the childhood. And most people like that in the lower middle class didn't have playgrounds in the localities where they would be able to afford house, In the poorer communities, you would not have the playgrounds. So you have to play on the roadside. How would our parents have left us? What guarantee they had that if we were in danger, somebody will come to our rescue? That must have been the faith. Correct? So social capital is a faith in the collective trust that someday, somewhere, it will be reciprocated, not exactly by them, not exactly by the beneficiary, somewhere, somebody. In my locality where I live, my children may also get the same advantage. Let me do it here. A long chain of reciprocity. Not the same parent, but somebody else will do that for my children. But I have done that already, actually. Had done when I was a child. Already I have benefited from that social capital, correct? All of us sitting here have benefited from social capital. All of us, without exception. Third, my right to censor the behavior of third party censure. I am third party, correct? I am not a party of the family. I am a third party. I am censoring their behavior. Somebody is teasing a girl, I go and stop them. Sometimes people get killed. You read in the newspapers. What makes them to take that initiative? She's not their sister. Correct? Why should they risk their life? People risk their life, People risk their life. Even today they risk their life. आज भी ऐसे लोग. Correct? Because they don't feel that somebody who is vulnerable should be allowed to suffer. Where does this come from? What are the roots of this behavior? I कहाँ से social capital? Where does it originate? Where does this responsibility come from? What is the source? Did it happen just like that? No. There has been a great degree of evolutionary strategizing by the communities, generation after generation, for thousands of years. Then it has evolved in our character, in our behavior. It did not happen by chance. A tremendous effort has been put behind it. And this effort, we need to take note of. It's not easy, but it's not random either. So, go back to that example of fishing. If one uses a gill net of 2 inches or less than 4 inches, the society may boycott that person. Hukka pani ban. Nobody will have social relations with that person. Sanction. Third party sanction. Trust. If I use 4-inch net, you will also use 4-inch net. There is expectation, right? That we will all conform to the rule, otherwise it will not work. Reciprocity. If you notice somebody using a 2-inch gill net and don't inform, somebody else will not inform, and somebody else uses it, the whole society, whole trust will collapse. So we did a study once of dorm pantries in one of my courses. There are about, at that time there were 18 dorms. So on old campus we have 18, right? Huh? So there were 18 dorms at that time, several years ago, and asked the students to tell us how many of them were running in profit, how many were in loss. So we found that there were some running in profit, but most were in loss. So we said, okay, so we asked them to do, the group that was asked, given this project, they did a survey, and one of the questions was, did you observe someone, there was also a student store which used to run in loss for a long time. So the question was, did you observe somebody taking things and not paying for that? It was an honest system. Honest system means you take yourself and pay for it. Nobody is going to ask you. That's the way it should be in a mature system. So many people said yes, they observed somebody. Did you complain? No. Why? Because he was my friend. So if he's your friend, then you will stint. Right? Social capital breaks down. Social capital breaks down when you apply rules for your friends differently from for the strangers. दोस्तों के लिए एक कानून और बाकी लोगों के लिए दूसरा कानून, तो social capital नहीं चलती. So what does it mean? The social capital requires an underlying layer of fairness and justice and some kind of impartiality. You have to be neutral, you cannot be biased, right? The great responsibility being put on every single soul to create what is collective, cannot be parceled, cannot be partitioned, but everybody will benefit from it, but there is no guarantee that all of you will benefit equally. Supposing I don't have children, then I will never have the advantage of somebody separating my children on the roadside, right? Then why should I contribute? But I still have to contribute. Well, my brother may have the children, my nephew may have, my neighbor has. So you see the kind of spirit that it evolves, the kind of character that it builds, the kind of consciousness that it builds is very different. In other words, underlying rules which are embedded in my culture, in my way of understanding things, are guiding my behavior. I am not even aware of them. Many times, I don't think of all those possibilities that I am mentioning now when I do something, correct? Doing happens almost like a reflex action. Reflex action. But what does this reflex come from? ये एकदम अकस्मात हमारा बिहेवियर हो जाता है, हम बच्चों को हटा देते हैं, किसी के भी बच्चे होते हैं, अगर खतरा हो जाए उनको, हम लोग when we stand at the airport, sometimes you must have noticed children are standing near the conveyor belt, right? और आपको लगता है वो बच्चे को लग जाएगी तो आप उसको हटा देते हैं फौरन. Many of you must have done that when the luggage comes on the belt. Why do you do that? Instinctively we do that, right? भाई देखिए आप इस बच्चे को पीछे हट जाओ बेटे, लग जाएगा तुम्हारे. उसके माँ बाप शायद ध्यान नहीं दे रहे होते उस समय, उनका ध्यान कहीं होता है, but you get them because you feel hurt, you are worried. Why are you worried about the child? He is not a child. Why are you worried? उसकी चोट से हमें दुख क्यों हो रहा है? He is not our child. I am talking of today. In other words, the roots of what happened 20,000 years ago are still intact. What I am trying to say is that please understand the project of civilizational construction is not over. If certain rules designed 20,000 years ago can have our influence on our behavior today, then if we devise some rules today, they may have effect for 20,000 years. And we are going to work on those rules. What is ethical capital? Ethical capital is when you restrain your behavior without anybody watching you. So, all cultures have a taboo on hunting or on catching fish during spawning, but there is no sanction against it. We are not supposed to pick up the leaves of tulsi or other plant after sunset, correct? कोई देख रहा है क्या? कोई सजा देगा हमको? If you have a fever and you go and collect the leaves after sunset, anybody is going to punish you? Nobody is going to bother. But you don't do it. Why don't do it? Because you believe that plants are sleeping. Sleep क्या होता है? Because we know that respiratory cycle is reversed. If respiratory cycle is reversed, our forefathers might have realized that plants bear more stress when they are in the phase of releasing carbon dioxide and taking oxygen. Correct? So they created a taboo. So much so that if you have a factory making a cough syrup out of tulsi leaves and you offer the workers that I will give you double the wage for the night harvesting of the tulsi, the worker will say most likely, sorry sir, I cannot do it. Correct? नहीं करेगा वो. The culture is so deeply embedded. So those rules which we observe, even there is no third party sanction, and voluntarily forego a benefit current benefit out of a value which is internalized is an ethical capital. Imagine in a quality control system, if ethical capital was strong, everybody who makes the things will be conscious about their quality. You don't need an inspector, actually speaking, ideally speaking. If everybody has if an organization has high ethical capital, अगर नैतिक संपदा हमारी ज्यादा है तो फिर हमें क्वालिटी कंट्रोल करने की जरूरत नहीं है भाई, ideally speaking, because everybody who does it will internalize the logic. But ethical capital also gets eroded just as social capital gets eroded. But it is there. A lot of things you do, and you do them when nobody is supervising you. Correct? And there is no reward for it. In many homes, first bread is given to the birds or cow. See? I mentioned that yesterday, and I believe many of you must be practicing that in your homes. Nobody will bother you if you didn't do that. कोई सजा देगा आपको, कोई पड़ोसी आपका बहिष्कार करेगा? Nobody will bother you. No neighbor will feel bad about it if you didn't do that. It's a private decision, and nobody will reward you either. But you do it because that is the way you think that's the right thing. In your food, there's the share of the nature, and therefore you need to take it out for nature. In some houses, they keep one bowl, handful of powder atta in a separate bowl. Right? Different ways. In North Gujarat, there are villages where they collect grains up to 40 kg from each household to feed the birds on a common platform round the year. पूरा गांव देता है अनाज, आज भी देता है, चबूतरे के ऊपर डालने के लिए. On a platform, bird feeding platform, you offer the grains. The whole village does it. In fact, what we have found is, in the regions where scarcity of production is higher, that means rainfall is lower, you have more institutions of caring for nature. Anand, Valsad, some of the parts of Valada, developed part of Valada, we don't have such chabutras. You see the point? We have in North Gujarat, we have some parts of Maharashtra, but we don't have in Central Gujarat. Correct? We don't have. That's the fact. Where there is more surplus, this value has been lost. Where we have more to spare, we spare less. Where we have less to spare, we spare more. What a paradox. Strange, isn't it? Strange. In a poor's house, you go without appointment and without knocking the door, correct? Isn't it true? Any one of you who has done a field work, you have a God-given right to you to enter anybody's house. Do it for the people who are rich in Ahmedabad. भगा देंगे बाहर. You understand the point? Now, these are distortions. These are distortions, actually. These are not the way our society was designed. This is not the way we have evolved. This is a very small, please understand, we are talking about 200 years of contemporary history, post-industrial society. Don't get worried about it, please. In a society where we are talking about 20,000 years, one of my purpose of this course is to help all of us resolve that we will not be overawed by the experience of 200 years. In a society which has grown over 20,000 years. क्या बात कर रहे हैं हम लोग? Why are we so dominated? Why are we so convinced that what happened in 200 years is the way society will be? No! 200 years is a speck, a small spot in the long chain of history. We can easily erase it. Assume that it is not there. We can reverse it easily. That empowerment, that confidence, that trust in the younger generation particularly. Our time is over. But all of you are young. This trust is necessary. You must have this faith that you can change it. And you have to change it. There is no other choice. Why we have to change it? Because this capital is very crucial. The knowledge about all of this is what is called as intellectual capital. Correct? Whole range of transactions, knowledge. This is intellectual capital. Now, intellectual capital was available, as we discussed yesterday, for sharing in different forms. So, we have folklore, we have stories, we have written documents, we have inscriptions on the stones, we have palm leaves, we have a ritual of telling stories, and through